The Film Verdict gives you Noir 360, hosted by Rashid Bahati, a global podcast that explores the impact and influence of Black cinema around the world.
Welcome to Noir 360. I'm your host, Rashid Bahati, and today I'm really excited about having someone that on the program today that I think is phenomenal and has done a lot of really cool work in the film industry. And of course, Noir 360 is brought to you through the platform of The Film Verdict. And we deal with the subject of Black film from an international, domestic, any perspective, including culture and the arts and everything rolled into one. And so today I'm happy to have Kevin Arkadie on the program. How you doing, Kevin?
Great, man. Great. Thank you for letting me participate.
Oh, for sure, man. Like you just mentioned before we started, it's been about a decade since we've actually seen each other, but this is really a pleasure for me to be able to talk to you on this new platform we call Noir 360, and we're dealing with film and television and all the entertainment arts, and as it relates to visual arts on that level. And I think you're a key person to talk to, so thanks for being here.
Sure. Well, like I said, happy to be here, Rashid. Great to see you.
I just want to give a little introduction to the audience about who you are. Kevin has created landmark television programs such as New York Undercover, The Shield, Soul Food, NYPD Blue, and others, and many others, actually. He is also an adjunct professor at the University of Southern California, and has won numerous awards from Image Awards, Golden Globes, Adelco Awards, you name it, and he's done it. And currently, what I see here, we can talk about it as we get into the conversation, but you're showrunner for BET Plus streaming TV services. And I'm not sure exactly what that was that fell. But anyway, Kevin, again, it's a delight to have you here. The Sacrifice, I guess, is a program you're working on currently, shooting in New Orleans, Louisiana. So, again, welcome, and let's get right into it, man. This is an interesting time right now in the business, period. And you, as a writer, producer, director, come from all forms of how you integrate into the business. So let's give our audience a little view of who is Kevin Arkadie. Where did you grow up, Kevin? And give us a little background.
Well, I mean, the short version, I am originally from Washington, D.C., and which they call it the DMV now, but I was born in the city, and in my earliest days, I lived in the city, and that sort of informs a lot of who I am, where I came from, what my foundation was, because, we moved from the inner city when I was a teenager. And so that progression went from Washington, D.C., like an all-black neighborhood, out into the suburbs of Maryland. My mom worked for the government, so that was a big transition, because we went from all black to kind of all white, and then from there, a few years later, my mom transferred to. You can tell I'm going to say my mom a lot, because I basically grew up in it. And,
well, I met your mom, and you have a beautiful mom. Incredible woman. So go ahead.
Yeah, so then we moved to Texas, where I finished high school and went to college at SMU in Dallas, Texas, studying theater, studying to be an actor. And then I went to New York, and I was in and out of New York for about 10 years. And during that process of auditioning and acting and writing and struggling, I said writing, I began to write scenes in New York. I was always writing what I considered to be literature or schlock, horror, whatever. But I started writing scenes since I was auditioning for plays, and me and a lot of my friends were struggling, lonely, separated. So I go, hey, look, I wrote some scenes. Why don't we come over on Sunday afternoon, drink some coffee? I'll scramble up a box of donuts, and and that's basically how my performance writing career got started.
Well, on that note, I find that very interesting. What other than you striving to be an actor yourself, what the storytelling aspect of things, what motivated you more in that direction? Did you do it out of necessity, or there was a creative urge, or did somebody actually open a door and motivated you towards writing?
Well, from my youngest days, I'd always been, telling stories and writing and creating. So my original ambition, and it's kind of still my ambition, it's just, I've been paying the bills by writing performance. I call it performance, like television, movies, things that require somebody to perform them. But, I was set to be a novelist. I consider that to be real literature. And then a short story, which I consider to be even more, a badge of honor to be able to write a good short story. But then most short story writers I know are professors at colleges, and though I'm an adjunct professor, that wasn't where I launched my arrows. I go, I really want to have an impact, and I really want my ideas to get out there, whatever they might be. A little egotistical quest for validation, and so I took the training that I got as an actor, and which included breaking down stories and breaking down motivations and analyzing scenes, analyzing stories, analyzing characters, and all of that. And I just began to write about things that were people, predominantly people, and people in situations that interested me. And, out of that comes a play. String a couple of scenes together, and you have a play, and, people take a look at it and they go, hey, I think this is pretty good.
So was that, are you referring to maybe the first play that you've done as a writer?
It's not the first play that I did, but it was the first play, and it took years to produce in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the first play that was produced on 42nd Street in New York at a small theater row in New York. And there was a group called the Frederick Douglass Creative Arts Center. And it was founded by Frederick Douglass Hudson, I found out later, and Bud Schubert. And those two men saw my writing, and don't ask me, I don't know how I did it, how I got to these two, but I did. And they go, hey, we think you have talent. It needs to be honed and refined and all this kind of business. So they kind of took me in, and then Fred worked with me for quite a few years on a number of things I was working on. And he finally got the money together to put together a play, and he decided to do the play that I had written.
What was the name of that play? You remember?
A Life Like the Rest.
A Life Like the Rest. Interesting.
Right. And probably the real breaking point. Bud Schubert, he's the Academy Award-winning writer of On the Waterfront and a number of other things. So he's from that generation, really well-known, well-respected. He pulled a few strings and got a New York Times reviewer to come out and review my play, and got a pretty good New York Times debut review. And there's a validation. I go, okay, all right, I haven't been completely wasting my time.
Right.
There really is talent here, and it's been it's that validation that all of us in the arts are kind of looking for.
Right.
I mean, my work, the work I do really is of no value if nobody sees it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you different, but I'll tell you I don't care, and for the most part I don't, but I do care when somebody gets their hands on it.
I guess that's what brings the validity to actors or directors receiving awards, you're being recognized for your work that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's always funny because I'm sort of in the middle. You have those people who they're out there, but then they're shy. And they go, "Oh, leave me alone. I don't want." Come on. You put yourself out there. You didn't do it not to be seen. You didn't do it not to be read.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me what your tenure in New York and the success of on whatever level it was with your first play, that propelled you to do what?
To move.
How was that?
Well, okay. So I was coming along. All right, look, I'm from Washington D.C. I'm an urban kid. I didn't migrate from anywhere. All right, so that was a generation before me. At the time, this is when August Wilson became super powerful, and deservedly so. And his stories are great, and they're epic, and they're migration plays and people moving from one area, moving into an area. And I didn't have that story, but that when I was in New York, at least it was my feeling that was the type of play that needed to be written to get produced at a higher level than what my show was at the time, or what I was interested in writing. And I was interested in writing a lot of contemporary stuff that, and I still do that. I still, one of the luxuries of growing up in my entire growing up in inner city Washington, D.C. is where I sat in my society, there was no black and white. It was just all black. White people were kind of irrelevant in my life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I remember asking my mom. I go, "Mom, where are all those white people?" When I'm watching television, she goes, "You're going to find them soon enough."
Well, I'm sure that shifted when you went to SMU, right?
I shifted when I went to Maryland.
Okay.
It shifted. I go, "Oh, there they are. Oh, there they are." But at the same time, my storytelling wasn't really, I mean, for better or for worse, I mean, it sort of contextualizes where we are in the country. A lot of POC writers are writing with that, in respect to where they are culturally. At least that would be my what I consider to be my observation. And I just I would just write stories that are just stories. And it's still out there. I mean, it's a whole different topic to get into as a writer of color. It's still like blackface, black story, and what's a black story? I mean, every story you write is a black story, but in the market that we work in, that's a little bit more constrictive.
Interesting. Explain a little bit more on that idea.
Well, the idea is, even though right now, thank God for Netflix, there's lots and lots and lots of opportunity for black writers, and a lot of the integration that we always thought, and a lot of the just because of the color of your skin, be it brown, yellow, black, whatever, you can now sift into the world of just general storytelling. But there is a cutoff point, like say if you're going to create series, or you are going to write a feature movie. Say I walked in with Wall Street, basically the script of Wall Street.
Mm-hmm.
I am still going to say I will not be able to sell that movie, the exact same movie that was made, just because there's that ceiling. It's still there. I would need to have been the head of a Fortune 500 company, and shit, for all I know, put some of the funding up myself. That's just my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
I might be right, I might be wrong, but I would say take a look at the real world and you show me where that's happening. Well, I know there's tons of writers of color who are writing these stories because that's what's
yeah. Well, I think that's the value of this conversation. that we're having is that your experience has taught you some things about this business, and from a writer, producer, director perspective, and just as a human being, involved in an industry that you've been around for years. I find it so compelling when you break it down that way. And I think those are the misnomers that a lot of people maybe don't think about, that if you walk through the door with the same story, like you mentioned Wall Street, if you had been able to, would you have been able to actually get a green light for a story like that? And that brings me to even asking you about when I met you years ago, and I think someone mentioned, oh yeah, Kevin did New York Undercover. I said, wow, I didn't know that. And one thing led to the next. But I was just so impressed because that was like a number one TV series at the time. So could you just give us a little insight on how that evolved for you, that particular series, and how you got into the door, how you actually opened that door, or how did that door open for you?
Well, okay, so everything, the beginning is never the beginning.
Okay.
That actually began. It's kind of a long-winded way of my first staff job was on I'll Fly Away.
Yes.
Ballsy, run by David Chase. Writers were Henry Brummel and Barbara Hall, David Chase, and myself, which is that was my first gig, and I don't know if I ever got a better gig than that, to be honest, just in terms of writing, performance. A lot of that is luck, being in the right place at the right time, and a lot of it is making your own luck, because I've just written a ton of material. I had no life in my 20s. I was working, I was writing. So that show was Emmy nominated both years I was there. I was nominated for Humanitas prizes, maybe some Image Awards, I can't remember. And we were at the Emmys and the Golden Globes and the whole nine yards. So I made a quick name for myself, and I was that black humanist writer when I left that show, because it was very personal. It was very quiet. It was very austere. And even though it was set in the South, it was like it wasn't necessarily the protest times. It was, how did a black family and a white family coexist and survive during this time that we know is going to percolate and boil over. So, and it was also with Regina Taylor, who someone I went to school with. We're good friends to this day. So that show ended. It was one of those shows where they said it's too good for TV. I don't know that anything is too good for TV, but if it doesn't get the audience,
right,
it's not good enough.
Right, exactly.
So, a lot of praise, a lot of prestige, not enough viewers for CBS at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So, coming off of that show, my agents asked me if I'm interested in there's a project over at, they call it the Wolf Camp, or basically Dick Wolf. And the situation was, this was the early 90s, and hip-hop was not what it is today. It wasn't in our DNA as it was now. Right then, it was popular. It was growing and popular. They thought it was going to be a trend. We thought this was going to be a topical, like a really good time to tap into this urban music that was beginning to, at the time, it had kind of a toehold. Andre Harrell was the president of what was called Uptown Records.
Right.
He had some issues with Uptown Records. There was another Uptown Records. They had to resolve that. So that's why our original show was not called Uptown Undercover. So he had a deal at Universal, MC Universal. Dick Wolf had a deal at Universal. They thought they would put those two entities together and come up with a very cool, topical, hip television series, music, style, fashion, kind of reinventing Miami Vice, except in New York.
Right.
That was the original idea.
Huh.
I don't know how close we came to that, because to me, Miami Vice was all about the boats. And I'm looking,
Right.
so they brought me in. And they said, look, I want you to meet with Dick and meet with Andre, and then meet with this other group from Chicago called the Slick Boys. And the Slick Boys were like Chicago housing police, who also rapped within the communities to kids. Basically, they would go around and do these performances. Because some kid on the street had challenged them. He goes, cops are always like busting kids on the corner because they don't understand rap, and they challenged them that you can't even do this. So what I was told by the Slick Boys was, they said, yeah, we can do that, and we're going to prove it. And so they would go and do these performances and then talk to kids at the various schools in, inner city Chicago. And that was kind of like their mission, how they were going above and beyond the police work that they were doing relating to the kids. And so somehow or another, they had gotten to Andre and or Dick. And those are the three components that I was invited into to see if I could come up with an idea for a story.
That's
interesting. So a lot of people go like, how did you create it? That's how
right. That's how you created it.
You got a phone call that says, hey, come in and see what you can do with this.
Right. So was that in your wheelhouse from a contemporary perspective of what was going on, a slice of the culture in New York and young people, fashion, music? Was that where you were as a person at that time?
I've always been into music.
Yeah.
I mean, in another life, I mean, probably this life too, I still play around with composing, and I play a number of instruments and, things like that. So music has always been important. Fashion, I've always loved it, but I could never afford it.
Right.
So, but then it's New York City, so it's New York. So, I mean, the fashion for hip hop, I could afford that.
Right.
I mean, in the early days.
Right.
I afford it now. But I had no interest in doing a cop show, to be honest. I thought they were idiotic. From my world, I mean, look, I'm black in America. I kind of get a bird's eye view of a cop and the world of cops. I mean, no matter, even if I didn't want to, I know what cops are. I know what their lives are. I know what they do, even just by inference of talking, being pulled over, being, stopped, whatever. So I'm like, all the cops shows on television I was looking at, I'm like, this is all BS, and I want no part of it. So when they brought me in, I go, okay, how can I get around it? I mean, the first thing that here's what I am. I'm a person of color. So let's just jump in there and tell our stories from that point of view, and no interest in whitewashing it. And under the umbrella of the hip hop world, I got licensed. I've been very, very lucky. I've been at the right place at the right time and got the right license to do things that weren't being done.
Right.
So New York Undercover, I'm like, hip hop. Okay, there's some shows that are doing some things with music. I'll go back and I'll look at what we did on that show, and that music just hits you. It just, bam, it is just so in your face. I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
I go, I did that. Well, we did that. So the genesis was, and I put this in the first episode. I'm like, okay, it's a different world for these two cops. Walking the streets as police officers, this is a completely different world. And I tried not. Right now, it's kind of a cliche of the undercover black cop being pulled over by a cop who doesn't recognize and doesn't trust him. It's kind of a cliche. So right. Even then, I go, okay, let me try to do this a little bit smarter. But it's a real thing.
Right.
It's a real thing, and that's in the very first episode. That happens. I try not to make too big a meal out of it, but I'm like, okay, they got to walk a different path to do the right thing. And that's the genesis of New York Undercover. So, but I got to give Dick his props, master salesman, and also
huge producer.
Well, I mean, yeah, he's a producer, but you can only produce what you can sell.
Yeah.
You can't sell it, you can't produce it.
Right.
Well, I'm watching him go to work, and Fox was in a place now. Fox is, very progressive. They were new. It was a new network.
Fox Searchlight or just Fox?
No, just Fox. In the early days, again, the early '90s. I mean, now you look at Fox and you feel like they've always been there.
Mm-hmm.
No.
Yeah.
No. Just like all these new streaming companies they have been getting breaks up until now. We'll see what happens in the next couple of weeks. But Fox was getting breaks, and they were taking chances, and they were trying to carve out their space so that they'd become a viable neighborhood. And so that's why, and Dick kept going in and basically holding their hands each step of the way. When you're developing these shows, I know now, and I kind of thought then, they're just looking for a reason to say no. And Dick was always ahead of it. I mean, now it doesn't matter because he's done like a gazillion shows.
Right.
And for a reason to say yes.
Exactly.
But back then they were looking for reasons to say no, particularly with this new type of genre show that we were doing. And, every time he had the answers on a cultural TV landscape level. I had the answer story-wise. Because I kept telling, I just kept it to what I knew and what I could certify as a person of color. And then also, because of my background and my storytelling, I have a very classical education, from, the Odyssey to Ibsen to O'Neill to Shepard.
Right.
So I can talk all of that stuff. And I can talk black.
Well,
black. But I always had a rule on that show. Don't pretend to be that black guy you ain't.
That makes sense. Well, let me take us a little deeper. Let's take a little deeper dive on, art imitating life for a second. With a show like that dealt with cops, I don't know if you're still writing things that deal with law enforcement at this time, are you?
Yeah, the script I'm working on last night. Yes.
Okay.
But it's my vision.
Okay. Well, this is my point around art imitating life. As you know, the current environment for men of color, women of color, as it relates to law enforcement, is pretty bleak at this point. It's just incredible the kind of things that are going on here in the States right now around policing communities of color. And for the simplest of things like traffic stops and so forth, and people are being shot down. How do you, as a writer, producer, director, how do you look at those kind of stories as you relate to current contemporary writing?
Well, okay, so I mean, you say it's bleak.
Well, I mean, I'm being.
Here's the thing.
There are other words I could use, but
But here. Let's just start at the beginning. And I go back to Richard Pryor. Richard Pryor, he had a thing where he got locked up for a minute, right? And he was talking about the people he met in prison.
Mm-hmm.
Thank God for prisons. Because there are some people out there who need to be put away from society.
Okay, so, that's agreeable. I agree with that.
Where if you take a poll of any black neighborhood, they really want the streets to be safe.
Of course.
So that's the main thing. Is that everybody wants the streets to be safe. You understand that some form, the policing thing is broken. It's gotten out of hand. but everybody wants safety. They want protection. Black, Asian, whatever, because there's everybody out there who wants to exploit them. So there is a need for the right thing, and then there are people who want to do the right thing. So when I look at the situation, that's what I'm looking at. I'm looking at the need and the people who try to fill that need, and what their obstacles are in filling that need. So that's how I look at our situation that we are, because, and I talk to police officers right now who, they're doing or trying to do their job, their work in this current situation. I don't want to back up and put all of it under a microscope. What I do want to do is put the individuals that are of interest to me under a microscope and see how they function within this world that we are living in. And the world we're living in, it's a cell phone world. I mean, you can't, it's this.
What did you call it? Did you call it a telephone world? What did you say?
It's a cell phone world.
Cell phone world. Okay.
Okay, so here's the thing. I'm working on this piece right now, and I have witnessed some very cool shit riding along with some police, and I've witnessed some really horrible shit, and I've witnessed, sort of like being on quote unquote the wrong side of seeing some brothers get locked up and chained up and shit like that. And I'm sure the cops were being on their good behavior because I was there. And that's very conflicting. And at that point, I turned the camera back around on me, and I'm like, well, what are you feeling right now? This is kind of tough. To, you want to say something, but I'm a guest of the police, and they're giving me this and they're giving me that, and I'm getting insights into the individual, not the institution. Some of it's looking inside the institution, and that motivates a lot of my police work. But it's the people working within this institution who generally want to do what's needed. And what's needed is usually the right thing. But, we're human. It's a human animal. So there's no telling what's going to come out of these situations. And right now, those situations that come out that make news, that go viral, are police interactions where they are just vicious, ugly monsters.
Yeah.
So I'm writing. I wrote this script a while ago, and I'm reading it, and I'm looking at one of the cops. He comes along. Some lady walks out with her 4 kids. She's about to pop, and it's just one of those things. He delivers a baby for her. And I'm like, oh, there's some other ugly shit in my stuff as well. That's a little bit more,
right.
On the other side of what the bad part of it. But it's kind of like that in between the lines. So it's like, okay, shit, this is something that does get to happen when you're out there. And that's what is the motivation for a lot of people. They get to do this kind of good. But, the same two cops go along and they do some brutal shit. Yeah.
Do you see, though, just as a trend, as it relates to where the industry is now, and blacks that are involved in the industry and other people of color, do you think that the industry is accepting stories that have broader lenses around these types of social issues that are happening?
No.
And why? Those stories don't need to be told, or we just don't have the mechanism to tell them the way we want to? What is the holdup?
Well, I mean, I'd have to look at the landscape and just see what's out there. When I say no, I just kind of go, well, if there was, I could point a finger at it and
sure.
Go, oh, they're doing that here, they're doing that there. This show, there was a show, Shots Fired, that was on Fox a number of years ago. There was American Crime Story. There was, it's one of those things where we're in the entertainment business. And if enough people watched it, enough advertisers banked it, we'd be telling those stories.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to do those stories. I'm just saying this from the outside, because I generally focus on the individuals within that framework of a tumultuous situation like George Floyd, because that shit goes on every day. It just wasn't caught on cell phone.
Exactly.
So that's kind of the world that I like to portray. I'm like, okay, they didn't catch that on cell phone. What are these individuals doing? It's more interesting to me what I didn't see than what I saw.
Right. Exactly.
So I hope this is making sense. And yeah, those stories are important, but I think the hard part is couching it in a way that is entertaining and that has numbers. Probably the best thing, the game changer for our entire industry and why so many of us are working now is Netflix. Netflix goes, hey, we're about underserved audiences. And which meant all of a sudden you're going to see, which gave us room to tell stories that were not available on the broadcast networks, the ones that were trying to grab the largest demographic of viewers across the country. So yeah, thank you, Netflix. Thank you, Stars. Thank you, HBO. I mean, not quite to the level of Netflix, because Netflix, with their deep pockets, just said, hey, you got a story? Come tell it.
Yeah.
It's your audience. If your audience is African Americans in the inner cities, come on, yeah, let's tell it.
So that brings me to, I know we went back and looked at a couple of things you've done in the past. Let's talk about where you are now with this whole dynamic of changing landscapes with streaming, with all the new opportunities. You keep mentioning Netflix and all the other things that are going on. What is Kevin Arkadie doing now? What are your focus areas? What are projects you may have coming up? What's happening?
Well, I do have a right. Okay, so I'm just finishing up Sacrifice with Paula Patton for BET streaming. It was season 2, and I'm assuming it's going to air. I'm going to say this summer. BET has not said when they're going to drop the episodes. We're about a week away from giving them all the streaming episodes, and we sort of like prepped the commercial episodes, and lots of music. For BET, they wanted kind of a show that really looks good. It's fashionable, stylish. It's it's gritty. It's aspirational. It's not quite what they're doing on Stars. In terms of it's the flip side. It's like you got this sort of like really glitzy, glamorous, good-looking black people who dip their toes or sometimes their whole bodies into the dark underworld versus the a lot of storytelling that's really popular amongst our demographic is the dark, gritty world trying to dip their toes up into the uptown. I'm a thug, but I want to be. I want my family, aspirational. I want my family to grow up and go to the best schools, the best private schools, and I want to buy the best clothes and live in the best parts of town. But to do that, I gotta do some dirt.
Right.
So I'm kind of right now with that series is sort of going from the other side of it, and and again, the job is to make it as entertaining and try to break some cultural modes whenever I can, if I can. But again, the main thing is don't change that dial till we get to the credits.
Right,
Dial.
right.
You don't even say dial anymore. What do you say? Change channel. Don't change channels to get to the credits. So that is what we do.
Yeah.
You know, what the story is, and it's not a movie. You didn't go to the movie theater and your ass is trapped in the seat because you went to all this trouble. You're at home, got your remote. So
are you doing more producing now as opposed to writing, or are you still engaged as a writer?
I am a showrunner.
Mm-hmm.
Means I do a little bit of everything.
Oh, okay.
I write, I produce. I directed the last 2 episodes of our season, and you know, I'm the pivot point for so many things that happen on the series. And so that's what I'm finishing up. And I think for me, and you know, when I'm at USC, you know, I basically share. I go, look, listen, knowing my background, knowing myself, what I like to do, how I like to write, knowing that my point of view, I am not that mainstream black man. Never have been, never will be. I'm just a storyteller. You know, if I don't know it, I try to go out and research it. I try to learn it. I try to imagine it. I try to channel it. But what I do know intimately is my own personal experiences. And a lot of that is just being black. And oftentimes black had nothing to do with it. So,
right. Well, this is really cool, man. We're talking to Kevin Arkadie, and this has been a really fascinating journey of how the process works. What would you say to up-and-coming writers and producers as some points of, hey, this is how you should look at this and keep pushing? What would you give them as a point of advice?
Well, see, I don't know. I can tell them what works for me. Again, that's kind of what I'm leaning into. Like,
yeah,
you get a lot of young writers who want to change the world. They want to write the world. Well, I wanted to write write RIGHT the world, but
yeah.
I don't want to WRITE about writing the world. I just want to tell a story where the audience. See, it kind of gets lost in the weeds here. What would I tell them? I would go, be able to tell 3 or 4 different versions of your story.
I like that. Just don't be locked into one concept.
Yeah. So, because as a matter of fact, I was looking at some stuff the other day, and I'm like, wow, they just went straight at it and didn't diverge at all. I'm like, well, but I've already seen that.
Mm-hmm.
So, so that goes into, like, just in terms of just being a better creator overall. I've been fortunate enough to work with with a number of very, very brilliant producers at the top of their game who did everything totally different than the predecessor or whoever I was associated with. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, it works that way.
Yeah.
It works that way. It works this way. There is no one way that it works.
Do you see the opportunities expanding for, producers, writers, women, color in the industry?
Well, right now there's a contraction. I think that's right because everybody's pulling back.
Mm-hmm.
We may have hit. There's this time next year. There's something like 600 television series right now. It ain't gonna be 600 this time next year.
Mm-hmm.
It's not sustainable. So, so what's going to go first, in my opinion, my cynical opinion, is these stories that aren't reflective of the stories of the puppet masters, the people who are in the offices. A company like Yeah, it's happening. Like even along Netflix, they're going to really start gravitating towards those big names.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a few of us, but so right now, I think we sort of hit a peak of a lot of POC getting shots, a lot of POC earning a living, a lot of them getting a break, which is fantastic. Across the industry, a lot of people got too many breaks, too many opportunities that they were not ready for. That's across the industry, black, white, whatever. So there's a cutback in that area, which I was talking to a director the other day, and she said because of the hardships that are happening financially, and because of what they're anticipating, because of the climate of the potential writer strike, because they're good and experienced and bankable within their field, they are getting the yeoman's amount of work. They're just getting an abundance of work that has been going out to a lot of younger, less experienced directors.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you can follow that. So
Yeah, I hear you. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, so I'm anticipating, I don't know, some of that for me. I don't know. Right now, I'm just focused on, hey, I got some stories that I want to write, and I have always, I go, yeah, I can't write what other people write. I'm going to write it. If they like it, they'll call me. If they don't like it, they don't call me. And that's what's worked for me.
Yeah. Well, I think that's some good advice too, though, just kind of be yourself in the process and learn how to work the process. I hear you saying as well, learning how to work that process, work the environment that you're in.
So, there's, look, the increments are slow. I think what I'm looking forward to, like I know I've had some great shows that I've taken to some networks that were not purchased. And because that's a ceiling. That's a ceiling. When I go to them with a franchise that is not necessarily locked into being black. It's just a franchise. It's just storytelling. It's just a world. And I just don't know. And I could be wrong. I could be completely wrong. I doubt it. But they just can't wrap their minds around this man doing that. I mean, Shonda has done it, okay? That's what I'm saying. But a black, I can't believe there hasn't been a black Shonda Rhimes out there with some projects that a black man.
Yes.
Same could be said for some, for other POCs as well. But
yeah.
I'm just saying, because I personally know some people who had some great ideas, myself included. And I'm like, well, why weren't, and we're qualified. We have the experience.
Right.
The legs.
Right.
Why the hell didn't you buy that?
So what do you think? Why? Why not?
They couldn't wrap their minds around it. They couldn't put black man, non-black world. There's something wrong with that picture.
Yeah, I got you.
It doesn't fit in the cereal box of them
right.
being what their visions are.
Well, it seems like that's been a how do we break through that? Just as a concluding thought, as we kind of wrap this, how do we as producers, writers, directors of color, black, how do we break through that ceiling, in your opinion, as a concluding thought?
Don't quit.
Don't quit. I like that.
Yeah, don't quit. People are like, yeah, look, I'm sorry. Like, again, this is like growing up in, I'm going to give DC props. People go like, did you ever think we would have a black president? I'm like, of course. In your lifetime? I go, yeah, of course. It makes sense. things that make sense are going to happen eventually. In my lifetime, maybe.
Yeah.
I never thought we would not. I never thought I would not see a black president.
Right. I feel you.
It makes sense to me.
Yeah.
So, but for a lot of people, it's like, I'm sorry, I'm not going to get ridiculous over it. Yeah, I'm happy. Yeah, I get some tears and everything else, but that's just what should be happening.
Right. I feel you. So that energy of Chocolate City really rubbed off on you pretty heavy.
I'm going to say, yeah, in the beginning, that's still my original DNA.
Well, it makes sense, though, Kevin. I think we are the sum total of our life experiences. And so it has really been a pleasure, man, to talk to you today. This is great. I appreciate you taking the time. And look forward to talking to you again soon, man. Kevin Arkadie.
Thank you for giving me an audience, man. I love it.
I see you took off.
What we do.
This is all good, man. So I look forward to talking to you again soon, Kevin. Take care now.
All right, you too.
The Film Verdict gives you Noir 360, hosted by Rashid Bahati, a global podcast that explores the impact and influence of Black cinema around the world.